Welcome to The Empty Canvas, the podcast about how creativity begins. I'm the host, Pascal Anson, and today I'm joined by textile designer Emily Campbell. Emily, welcome.
Thank you.
So, I've been thinking about this idea of empty canvas, and I'm asking people what that means to them in terms of it could be a material, maybe in your case, or it could be a kind of starting point and a headspace that you need to get into. Or it could also be just an empty desk. So I want to get into maybe all of those things. Can you maybe start the conversation by maybe I'm just need to ask you what the empty canvas might mean to you.
Yeah, the empty canvas, I think as a designer, the empty canvas is, for me, it's kind of annoying. Like I need something. And when people ask me, what I start with, it's always some kind of structure. It might be the way one thing joins another, or the way one thing obscures something else, or the way, let me think of an example. I don't know, just the way something looks in terms of the kinds of shapes it has, the kinds of curves it has, the kind of angles, and so on. So I think if the canvas is empty, it's not empty for very long because I can't, it's just, it's got to start with something.
And is the prospect of starting with a fresh sheet, empty page, blank canvas, is that something that fills you with energy and excitement, or is there an air of kind of nervousness about what you're going to
Yeah.
start with?
It's a real block. I remember once thinking that I had, I suppose I wanted to make some designs that were quite, minimal, for want of a better word. So I make big quilts that are like 2.5 meters wide and 2 meters deep and so on. And I wanted to do something that just had some changes of color, possibly a big circle. The only idea I had was that there was going to be a big circle and some right angles, possibly some obliques later. And I tried to just kind of design something pathetic. They would look so uninteresting. And what I did in the end was go to something that I had previously improvised. The idea of which had been that I was going to see if I could combine stripes and circles. And I found this section of it that was in fact a big red circle in a kind of wonky rectangle with a kind of slash that was sort of like a dagger down one side, and then some interesting bit of sort of improvised, checkered stuff in the corner. And I photographed it, and then and that's where the design came from. Actually, it was a kind of a zoom in sort of section of something that I had not unconsciously at all, because even when I'm improvising something, you're very conscious of what you're doing, whether that worked or not. So, and then you build up a kind of stock of things that are gonna. So, and that became the design, because when I started from scratch, I just couldn't do anything.
Right, but when you just spoken about it now, you said I wanted to start with a circle and some stripes. Was that, and you've also mentioned minimalism already, and was that a kind of thought of I want to see if I can make something very simple, like just a circle and just some stripes?
Yes, I suppose it was.
Right?
Yes, I suppose it was. Yes, but that's when I say yes. Yes, I guess so. I wanted to make something that had quite typical. It wasn't sort of a busy pattern like lots of kind of patchwork quilts. It was more a composition of big shapes. So yes,
That's a very
the circle and the stripes thing was much more of a kind of self-conscious kind of Bauhaus type. It's like visual experiment, totally.
Exactly. Yeah. I can imagine you thinking, right, I'm now in my Bauhaus era. Let's see if I can reduce it right down to some basic elements.
Yeah.
Right. I think lots of people were.
Yeah, in fact, when I write about that design, I do mention the kind of elemental circle, square, and triangle, because they're all in there.
Yeah.
They're just a bit squiffed.
Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting starting point in terms of like modernism or minimalism, is taking something that has been tried and tested lots of times in architecture, in graphic design, in textiles, and just thinking, well, I want to see how my take is on
Yeah.
graphics
Yeah.
in it. So I think that's a really nice that's a really nice kind of starting point
Mm.
and very kind of easy to understand. Can we rewind though a bit, because I think we need to explain that you, before you got into textile design, you were a graphic designer, so
Yeah.
you have an incredibly
Mm.
strong sense of the graphic. How does your graphic design training influence that starting process?
Well, I did my MFA was at Yale, so I'm really directly in the I'm a direct inheritor of the teaching of Joseph Albers, who was the first director of design at Yale. Meaning, when he was director of design, uh, in the 1560s, it was the architecture school, the painting school, and the new school of graphic design, which is the one I went to, and sculpture later as well. So design was all those things in a very lowercase d. Well, you can cut all that stuff out. But anyway, Joseph Albers had founded the design program, in which that I later studied. And so to me, and I was coming to design school without having studied any art since my O level. I'd done a bit of life drawing, and I discovered design working as an administrator at Pentagram, and so I was desperately looking for, well, how big do I make it? Where do I put it? And what if it kind of comes off the side? What does that mean? Bleed. That's what it's called. But anyway, I had to learn all this from scratch, and I sort of during the time I was at Yale, I imbibed this very, I think, very kind of modernist, non-objective sort of idea that what I was doing as a graphic designer was finding ways to uh, suggest spatial dimension on a two-dimensional surface. So you realize how useful occlusion is. If you put one thing in front of another, the other one appears to recede, and if you bleed things off the side, it obviously can suggest sort of continuation. You absolutely need scale changes, because that is one way in which you might suggest that there's a depth perspective as well going on.
Or one thing's more important than the other.
Oh, one thing's more
Yeah.
important than the other for sure, but actually spatially that is kind of backed up by the illusion of sort of three dimensions that you're creating on a two-dimensional surface. A classmate of mine, who is a very well-trained Dutch designer, said to me, yeah, it's not all about that, Emily, but I did kind of think, for now, I'm just gonna work on that. And there was a sort of breakthrough collage that I made, I think in my second year, in some sort of workshop we had, in which I don't know, somehow I was kind of freed up, and I was just trying to make this kind of crazy collage of like wood texture and color and a bit of tonal photography, and I sort of felt for the first time that I'd sort of made something that kind of really sucked together in a way that I think something does when it's a successful design. And the tutor for that, or someone who came to the crit, said, well, yes, and then in all formal respects, this is very good. I'm like, oh, I've done something that's good, because I was mystified by what people meant by the formal aspects of design. And now yeah.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about graphic design in that way, because when I interrupted just then and I said about meaning, and we'll get onto your like excellent quote of word plus image equals meaning later on, maybe, but the way you're talking about it now sounds like you're talking about your textile design.
Yeah.
Because I said something bigger might have more importance or more meaning.
Yeah.
And the way I understand of graphic design and graphic communication is about things that are bigger and closer to you are more important than things that are smaller and further away.
Yeah.
If we're talking about this page, was it quite an abstract course in terms of what graphic design is doing? Because I think certainly when I've worked on a graphic design course, it was only about ideas. It wasn't really about typesetting or typography much, or books or screen-based media. It was much more about ideas. Sometimes there's courses which are just about typography, and it seems like yours have maybe taught. It sounds quite abstract how you're describing it, that it was taught in an abstract way.
I'm not sure abstract is the right word. I mean, so I did, on my trips to New York from New Haven, I would look at a lot of abstract painting. I looked at lots and lots of, abstract expressionism, lots of sort of early modernism, and I was just looking for the clues as to how they did it, like how someone like I don't know, Franz Klein kind of made those black paintings, all those black strokes look as if they had somehow had depth to them, and I remember being quite sort of obsessed by that, and it really, kind of diagnostic. But I suppose because it's graphic design, what it is semiotic, because usually you've got language, you've usually got typography, which in my textile work I don't have. All right, well I do. I do actually. Very sorry. That's stupid. I definitely do in one very specific area of my work.
Right.
But it really is so formalistic and so much about structure. The where I had come from was a degree in English literature, so I was writing all about meaning and the kind of coherence of language, and how effects are achieved using language. And so I suppose in a way I was kind of all over the meaning of stuff before I got there, and I found form quite unyielding in terms of meaning actually at the time. Now what's interesting is that I work in this medium, patchwork quilts, which are so famously like absolutely laden with meaning, and people will make quilts out of their baby's clothes or their kind of dead sister's clothes, or like they are these repositories of the past in very beautiful ways. And to me, I mean, I'm not really big on that, so I do use a lot. I'm afraid I do use a lot of new fabric as well as some old stuff, but I'm not I'm not trying. I'm not sort of big on the kind of semiotic sort of richness of my quilts, particularly. To me, they're much more formal exercises, and their meaning stuff is all sort of obvious in there.
I think what I'm trying to piece together here is the things that you've done previously to making quilts that inform the way your work looks, which is
Yeah.
very kind of iconic and specific. And I think it's really interesting to hear about not just jumping straight into a profession like textile design. What I'm hearing is that there's a lot that's gone before, a lot of richness and a lot of thinking and a lot of like trial and error and a lot of thought that has then informed a relatively new practice for you.
Yeah, no, totally.
It seems.
No, I mean, I did
I'm
grow
sure
up
you've
writing
been-
essays,
I'm sure you've been saying
making
for
things.
something.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get back to your question about the abstractness of my education. I suppose, and this is, I mean, I think this is a good design education, whether you're dealing with form or whether you're dealing with meaning, what you're looking for, what I'm looking for is two things really. I'm looking for a sort of economy. What's there is only what needs to be there, and a coherence so that every element kind of belongs. And my phrase I used before was like sucks to every other bit. Like
Yeah.
if you pull it away, then you've destroyed. That sort of that tension is the sort of coherence. And I suppose we were very much certainly made conscious of that in our design program at Yale. It was a very kind of disciplined design education in that way. It wasn't about decoration. And that is definitely a thread that I now trace back to, my education when I was, sort of doing literary criticism, or like the sort of fashion spur is a little bit, that's very much more about meaning, I suppose. That's a kind of side, because I did learn to sew professionally and I was a pattern maker.
All these things. I
Yeah.
mean, it's interesting that you do lots of these things, and then each one is slightly, well, not even slightly different, quite radically different from the next. And then it's almost like you've stored them up, and now you're putting them back all together and you're using them all, which is kind of amazing, because I think a lot of the time we think of a very linear path where if I do this course, or if I do this for this apprenticeship, or I work doing this for a certain amount of time, then that will lead me to the next thing.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to see this pattern cutting element, the English literature, the graphic design kind of coming together in this new out there that
Yeah, which is very artisanal.
do you think about
I just
that?
love sewing. Yeah, no, I mean the typographic project, which I think we can maybe get onto later, is absolutely a kind of coming together of all those elements because it is literary, it is typographic, it's graphic design, and it's sewing, which I just have always loved. But
I hate so much. No, I don't
you
know
do so beautifully.
I don't know what it is. I think it's a temperament thing that I love making stuff, but something about sewing that has always really, really irritated me. And I remember my grandmother teaching me how to use a sewing machine when I was probably like 6. And I love the bit where you kind of go, put your foot down and
Go.
all that, like, all fussing around. I find so,
Sorry.
oh my goodness. I
I
think
you
it's a
love that.
temperament.
I know you made your cut. Like when you sew a curve, you sew your convex bit of your curve.
Yeah.
And then because you're sewing right sides together and opening it out, what you have is something concave that you have to make. So you have to make you have to stitch to that. So you're sewing it that shape against that shape.
Yeah.
And so you have to stretch the concave one out around it. But then you do the miraculous thing of like pressing the seam open and it's in this beautiful curve. It's how a sleeve is put in actually as well. It's very tight convex curve against.
You're not saying this. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just, yeah. I think some people. It's not that I'm impatient at all. I'm very patient with other things. It's just the act of sewing. I just find super.
Is it all the pinning and the getting stuff in the right place?
No, I mean, yeah, a bit. I think. I don't know. I've spent recently a long time making the curve downstairs, and it just seems. I think when you're used to using something, I think this is what it is. When you're used to a piece of metal or perspex or timber or MDF to that point, it's very fixed and it supports on itself under its own weight. I find fabric very difficult to like physically manage, whether it's like a tiny thing or whether it's like a 6 meter cut.
Yeah. No, I find it miraculously yielding. Actually, I love that. And to me, it is the geometric phenomenon that you have to sort of take on board with sewing is that right sides together thing. It's the wondrous moment when you open something and you get a new shape that is straddled by this seam, and that's why these old-fashioned, centuries old patchwork quilt designs are, those are things that ladies just kind of discovered like on their knee and at their fingertips when they were making all these incredible patterns that they could produce just by putting triangles right sides together in a different way. I just find the geometry is absolutely amazing. Again, it comes back to structure. But if I don't know, I just want to go back to the coherence and the economy, because that is the thread that really runs through for me. So how I discovered design. I wasn't aware of design. I was always like aware of sort of style and stuff as a child. I used to fantasize about houses I might live in, but not design until I was managing the costumes for a university opera society production of The Magic Flute. I was working with a designer, and I was kind of supervising the costumes, although making them, and he or designing them. And I was on the way to meet him, and I was on the train, and I was kind of drawing all these nice like evening dresses that I thought the 3 ladies might have. And I got there, and he had like piles of books and research and like reasons why First Lady might wear this kind of dress with these kind of film references and so on, and why Papagena might be not Papagena, what's her name, Pamina might be kind of a bit like 1840s kind of romantic heroine, Walter Scott kind of, and so there was sort of building all this kind of logic towards the way something might look, and I've honestly never thought about that. But when I think about my literary training, absolutely amazing teacher at A level who got us all to think about, first person who made me aware of what are called conceited thought. So a conceit is, broadly speaking, translates as a metaphor, but we were, of course, like you do at A level, studying the metaphysical poets, John Donne and George Herbert, and who built famously these sort of elaborate kind of systems of metaphor. My thoughts are like a case of knives, and stabbing with every, and it's developed over several lines. So that's that's the sort of most extended form of the conceit. And I have never forgotten. So I, as a literary critic, I was always looking for conceited thought, i.e., its coherence and its economy. Does the whole thing kind of hold together and have all the bits that don't support or reinforce that metaphorical idea, that now structural idea, I suppose, for me, have they all been eliminated? So the thing is really really sucking together. It is editing.
That's just editing, you know.
Editing is, yes, but there's a way you can edit things formally. There's a way you can edit things absolutely. As, you know, the term is usually a literary one, but that's so now I can trace that search for coherence and economy through sort of everything I've done, really.
But I think when I think about you, I think you're an incredibly precise person, and but not in a kind of finicky way, but in a very reductive way, like you've edited your thoughts really, really concisely. So I think that, I mean, the thing that I love about you is every time I've had to explain something to you about design, you just get it like that. And I think that sort of forces me then to explain things to you with kind of your voice in my head, which is this kind of like reductive, but not in a minimalistic way, but editing things down and stripping away unnecessary aspects so that the main conceit or the main idea or the main design feature or aspects can really sing and be really important. Because otherwise, if there's some noise and fuss around it, and you're slightly distracted, I suppose.
Well, yeah, that's what when I first sort of met lots of designers, which is when I worked at Pentagram. And then obviously I worked with designers for years at the British Council, which is where I met you. But and the thing I really enjoyed about the designers I admire, certainly, is the kind of fierce discipline of their thought. Actually, it's not that things are kind of, I hate that limp phrase, it really works or it doesn't work. It's not that. It's like writing it's wrong. It's like, you're very sort of, I mean, I don't want to say dogmatic. You're not dogmatic, but you're very resolute about what is right and wrong about the design. And I feel like that too.
I think that was something that I learned in my MA at the Royal College, which was about, I wouldn't really call it right and wrong, but I think it's that thing of having one thing that works really, really hard in whatever you've made, whatever you've decided, and not relying on two things, one of which supports the other, or three things. I think, that's sort of interesting about having. Some people might call it clarity, but then also I think some people just observe what somebody else has done and think, yes, it works.
Yeah,
But they
sure.
but
I do that sometimes.
they don't analyze it.
that.
But
Yeah.
as creators, I suppose we work really hard to try and make something work.
Yeah, and to understand why, so that you can do it again. I mean, it does make us sound really uptight as designers, and obviously, I love virtuosic improvisation in any form, like someone who can just like speak off the cuff. Some, musicians who can solo, from nowhere. But you really, my feeling anyway is that you need to really, really know a lot in order to do that.
Yeah, and that's confidence as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But also, I think there's something though about setting something up to allow something to happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that does sound quite abstract, but it might be like setting this up so that we can speak freely, or it can be sometimes when I've spoken to artists, painters about the empty canvas, the preparation is really important. Like setting up terps and brushes and paints and palette and cloths to clean up with, and getting the writing light and the lighting right, and music and whatever it is, to allow spontaneity and improvisation to happen and flow to happen.
I suppose it's setting up the rules so you break them, or like really enforcing the rules so you can break them. So for me, it might be a kind of color thing, like,
How do you set stuff up when you're going to start a new piece? What does your studio look like? What does the moment before you start look like? How do you prepare?
Yeah. Well, there will be an idea. So I've been sort of, kind of baking. Well, okay, so right now I am baking an idea. I mean, no, not baking cakes. I don't do bake cakes. So I was kind of tipped off that somebody was doing a Robin Day event, and there was some vague whiff of a commission, like, you know, she might be interested in one of my editions of, like, you know, a small run of
So we should explain that Robin Day is
Robin Day is, yes,
design of
very famous, very
textile
famous in the
designer.
British post-war period. In fact, hugely responsible for many elements of the Festival of Britain in 1951, including the interior furbishment of the Royal Festival Hall, which
And probably most school children
have sat on a fully rock chair. Yeah, very famous stackable plastic chair. And so anyway, I guess so. What I started by I looked through some Robin Day books, and I'm in this kind of like exercise that could be slightly dodgy. Am I doing a kind of Robin Day parody? You know, but what I'm trying to do is see enough Robin Day that I start to sense what his visual language is. Like, is he really perpendicular? Actually, no, not at all. Nor is he 45 degrees or like really curvy. His ellipses are actually quite elongated. His obliques are quite slight, whether they're horizontal, off horizontal, or like off vertical. Anyway, I have come up with a design which is kind of based on the legs of the festival chair, the polyprop chair, the various of his early chairs. Not even. I mean, you can kind of detect a seat in the design, except that I've sort of masked it. So, and at this point, it's kind of released from Robin Day. It's just, I hope, a kind of formal sort of DNA that's palpable. You can make it look a lot more like parody by using color, of course, because you can use like Festival of Britain colors. But so that's a process. That's how I started there. With that one, I didn't start with any fabrics. Other ones, I might start with color. The other tends to be fabric.
I want you to go through that again. So you've been asked to do something, or you're aware of something that's happening with a specific designer, but also you're coming to that with a very strong awareness of not doing a pastiche or
That's the word.
a kind of homage to this person. So you're looking at visual reference and absorbing, as you said, the DNA of something. Is that a way to avoid that happening? Because
I don't know, maybe not. I think
I've
show you this design, you might think it's a commodity pastiche.
I've talked before about where inspiration comes from and how certainly it can be quite dangerous for designers to look at other designs within their sphere. So I don't look at much furniture and product and lighting design because I think it's really difficult to avoid being influenced by other people's stuff.
Yeah, but I mean,
I suppose that's slightly...
Yeah, okay, so this is a very, I suppose, kind of slightly over-specific point, because I'm a designer looking at another designer whose language has become very, is very familiar. Perhaps
But it's different disciplines, right? So all these furniture is on...
Yes, exactly. So what I did with when I recently made a bespoke cover for a concert grand piano, big thing that's in the art collection of Linklaters, big Magic Circle city law firm in London. And it started as a workshop with 18 sixth form girls from Captain Girls Academy. And so I took them through, it was about a 4-hour workshop, I suppose, and I took them through a design process. And it began with a tour of...
Are they art students? Were they?
They were studying photography and fine art.
Okay.
Because they were their A level subjects, and some of and not textile. Not textile. No. And they were coming on a visit to Linklaters for the day, all this social outreach work with schools. So it started with a tour of the collection, which is post-war, mostly post-war British art. A lot of abstraction, very little figurative work actually. And they had been briefed to take photographs of anything they'd look at. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, can be a detail, whatever, just anything you like, just anything that catches your eye. And then we did this kind of, this sort of 3-stage thing, ending with them making a collage on a plan of the plan of the piano, well, piano in plan, so the shape of it. But the stages were, so they took the thing that they had noticed or photographed, and they had to extract from it, like draw its main shape, or just find a shape within it. You know, and you might have to invent a bit, like if it's out of the view of the camera, then you might have to complete the shape, or do a shape that's sort of closed. And when you've got it, and you can like keep working. You don't have to be like blindly like loyal to the original. Just make it a really nice shape. So stage 2, then once you've done that, is make now give it a couple of siblings. Weird, right? What do you mean by siblings? Well, look at the shape.
Family resemblance.
Family resemblance, exactly. Same kind of curves. Or could you get away with opposite kind of curve, and still have it be a family member? Same sorts of angles, same.
I love that. I love that idea.
Well, it's in our, the deck of cards that called A Few Minutes of Design. It's called Simplify Then Multiply. It's on Multiply, and it starts with a photograph of salad or bicycle, jangly bicycles or something, and you have to identify a shape within it and then give it some siblings. And so I had them do, give it 2 and 3, so three shapes. Or what they're starting to make is, of course, what we in the biz would call a visual language, or a kind of language of shapes, a kind of alphabet of shapes. If you think of a typeface as a family of a very sort of formal family. So when they got 3, I said, okay, now here's some. I'm giving you some black, some gray, some kind of creamy white, and I've got some red as well, but I'm not giving you the red until you give me a reason why you want it. Tell me what you're going to do with it. Okay.
And how are they responding to this?
They're going to like it.
Quite strict.
And you're going to draw. You put your pencils aside because you can draw with your scissors now.
I love that.
You're going to cut out your shapes, and you'll need them. You'll need them in various sizes. So cut yourself a couple of small, couple of medium, couple of large.
But can't I draw it afterwards? With pencil?
Yeah, if you need to go, you could, no. So because with limited time, so I had them do it. So they have all these bits of paper that they cut out, and then I cut a few of them wanted red, but actually they didn't all want red. So, or maybe they were just intimidated because I made them like justify it. Tell me what you're going to do. Like, okay, tell me what you're going to do with the red first. Yeah, okay.
So no, not okay. You're not having it red.
Anyway, and then I gave them the plan of the piano, and they had to kind of make a sort of collage of their various shapes that they, and don't worry if they go off the side of the thing, because actually it's gonna have sides to it.
Yeah,
so
let me go over.
Yeah, and just kind of, just as you're building it, just think about what it needs, and you might need to cut another one, or it might be is that bit too dark? Do you need to make it lighter? Go for the light gray.
Yeah.
Or what if this bit of red right there? What's that? Anyway, they did this, and they came up with 18 designs. They're quite accomplished. They look really good. Linklaters have framed them and put them on the wall.
Oh wow!
And that is what. And one of them, I mean, we shortlisted about 6 to sort of develop a little bit. I made 3 maquettes, and we chose one to develop. And so I really developed the design, meaning that I looked really hard at Samia's language, and it was these big sort of quite bowed shapes, like sort of pillows, but they had sort of jaws cut out of them. So the thing's called Clapton Bite. And I sort of developed it. It's still, it is, you can absolutely trace its origin or DNA to her thing on the wall, but it's very, I've sort of sorted out the visual problems that I thought it had, and also extended it so that it went around the sides with the same kind of shapes and language.
I think that's such a good example about how to develop something and how to take something through from the start through to sort of executing it in kind of real scale.
Yeah.
Because all those things you've described, also with lots of people. I mean, when you work, it's just one of you, but when you do a workshop, you've got 18 people to be able to go through that. So the volume is kind of
That was really good sort of proof of concept, actually, because they look really good together. I don't know. Well, they're having an opening next week, and I will be able to talk to the girls about with 3 or 4 months of hindsight about how they felt about it.
Yeah, with a bit of distance from it.
Yeah.
So in terms of that what you've just described, and let's just talk about volume for a second, because before you start on something, some people, for sometimes the first idea is the best, but then sometimes you need to do a lot of development work before you start on something and say, well, that one's better than that one because, and you don't often verbalize it. It's just, it's not maybe even thought about in such concrete terms in your head, but instinct might tell you that one's better than that one. How much kind of not testing, but how many kind of iterations of a design might you have before you start making the piece?
Hmm.
Not maquettes, but
Yeah.
sort of variations
Well,
on
I mess
something.
around a lot on Adobe Illustrator.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
no, I do.
Can you explain that maybe? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, if I'm doing something that's a repetitive pattern, like really, if I got so my other way of working is with squared graph paper, and I just I count off the size, final size I want, and I draw within it, and I try to sort of use the squares to help me get things proportionally right, and uh so that's with a more sort of free composition. That's how I do it, or with something that's a composition rather than a pattern. I've not patterned my compositions, but
So by pattern, you mean something that repeats?
something very obviously repeated,
Okay.
like I have a quilt that's made of lots of squares, and they're obviously all identical dimensions, and lots of traditional patchwork is based on patterns, repeated patterns and panels of repeated pattern. So obviously Illustrator brilliant for that because you can like set your preferences to move the unit along by the dimensions for the unit, and it's really easy to do it that way. It's also very useful for quickly doing sort of color tests, although obviously the colors aren't the same as your fabric colors, so that's where you really have to make the decisions. But to get a rough idea of where you want dark and light and mid, it's useful to be able to use Illustrator just kind of quickly, or to show someone who's commissioning it, like when you could if you switch the whole thing to be light on dark, here's what it would look something like this. So yes, and I suppose I might make some probably not big changes of that stage. I mean, I've usually done if it's what I call a composition, so not something that's in panels of pattern. Like the things I made in India, one is like a big, huge tulip shape, and the other one's a big sort of mango with a couple of dots. And they're big, 1.5 by 2 meter quilts, sort of textile artworks. And those, I had a sketch in my notebook, and I'd roughly worked out where the seams go, because that's really, really important when you're doing inset patchwork. Inset rather than applique on top. And then, because I find actually drawing curves is just so much better done by hand. I wouldn't like. Why would I draw something like that in Illustrator when I'm actually trying to get it to that scale? I'm like tiling things is such a pain in the ass. I don't have a big plotter printer. So I might as well I literally pin the paper on my wall and I draw the thing by hand, and it's nice drawing curves like that, and I get a good result. So that stage, I suppose the changes happen with my sketch. Actually, not really. I've pretty much decided before I get to the big thing what it's going to be like.
And what infrastructure do you need before you start in your studio? What does your studio look like? What do you
Yeah,
have?
I have a really big table. I have a table that's 1.2 meters by 2.4, 1.45. Yeah, it's really big. It's actually two tables jammed together. And I have a domestic sewing machine, I have a steam iron, and I have a big rig for yeah, and I also have some, what's it called, the stuff, pinboard stuff.
Like corkboard or
Yeah, it's like corkboard. It's something I sewed. Anyway, I have like 2.5, almost 3 meters of that along one wall, so I do pin things up to look at them. And then I have a rig for photographing quilts. It's actually a big studio. And then I have buckets and buckets arranged by color of all my linens.
And what kind of state of mind do you need to be in? Because we talked a little bit about temperament already.
Yeah.
What kind of state of mind do you need to be in order to work?
Yeah. That's interesting, actually, because my husband's a painter and he has a studio down the corridor. And, if it's like 2:30 in the afternoon, the best of the day is gone kind of thing. And he's like, I'm not going now. I don't go. Because for him to get in the zone is quite whereas I'm just going to go for a couple of hours. I'm just going to like sew the next few seams and
Yeah.
leave. You know, it's actually, but
It's
I suppose
because
it's
you've got it planned out.
yeah,
Or as a
I've got it
painter.
planned out. Every day when I go in, I have every day of sort of sewing and constructing. I have a kind of ambition for what I want to achieve in that day, how much of it I want to get done. With designing, it's a little different. So yesterday I was working on the Robin Day thing, and it was all me and my laptop. And so I had a kind of rough design, but I couldn't work out. So my edition quilts, the idea is that I cut them like 6 up, and then I just and then the way I end up with 6 different quilts is that I just interchange all the pieces of color. So 6 different colors, all cut 6 up, and then given my trade secrets right here, and then I just kind of I rotate the colors so that so shuffle them exactly. And so I couldn't figure out how to do this one because I knew I knew I could get variety by just making one big cut, like a oblique cut, and matching that side with that side. But I couldn't get anywhere. Eventually, I cracked it, and I just all afternoon was just trying to crack this on Illustrator. And I'm gonna do. I've got some similar geometry to work out, which is just. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So that's different. That's very. You have no idea how long that is going to take. And I thought yesterday, giving up on this one until I finally figured out. And it was basically a mathematical thing that was kind of eluding me. It was actually that I've got 8 colors and 9 pieces here. 2 of the pieces are the same color, so I just needed to make sure that every color was in every shape of any of the.
So in your head, are those two things a little bit separate? Does the execution and the physical making of the artifacts, and that's a very, very different headspace? Because is that creative, that part, or is it the bit that comes before that that's creative? Well, how do you?
Well, it's not. I
Sometimes I feel like the making part
Yeah.
is not as creative, but that it allows you to think about.
Yeah.
It's meditative, maybe. It allows you to do other things.
Yeah, with what I'm doing, it's a form of joinery. Like a lot of I often say, the joining of parts is such a kind of unrecognized aspect of the quality of design. I have like hashtag joining of parts, which I maintain single-handedly on Instagram. But I think often when we say beauty is in the details, we're talking about the way one part meets another, the way that like balustrade meets the handle, or the way the way there's joints in your tripods or whatever. And so obviously what I do is patchwork. It's all about joining parts. And so it's not that it's creative, but you have to be very kind of disciplined and meticulous about your seam allowances and your, in order to get 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces to meet in a point, in a really perfect point with their seams pressed. It's just like, I love that. So that's planned. That's planned in the design, and as part of the kind of creative concept of this piece, it needs to have these points that just kiss.
And what are you thinking about when you're doing that? Because I see on Instagram lots of concentrating sewing.
Yeah.
And what's going to do?
I listen to podcasts. When I'm working out the geometry, I don't listen to anything. I'm just because like you got to remember all of this is like right sides together and then turn the right. Yeah, so that has been quite hard. My whole sort of tessellation of irregular pentagons. I'm really, really got to the bottom of that now. I can make those junctions absolutely perfect but for a long time I hadn't really, like, sort of, what's the word? Kind of internalized the structure.
I think that's what I hate about sewing is that there's something that I don't know how to do, and I'm just going, I fudge it.
Yeah. Well, you have to really, really understand. So I've got much better at making more than 3 things join now, because I've just kind of so for example, if you have a really slanted seam that's meeting say a kind of horizontal seam and a vertical one all at once, it's like how much you're gonna where on the slanted seam, you need to be very careful about where the end of that seam is, so that it's also the same as the seam that's in a corner here, and it's also the same as on the seam of the vertical here. And you just have all those things. You have to be really conscious of what are those going to be like when they fold back. So it is that kind of geometric inversion.
I'm feeling really triggered by that. Stop that. honestly, my heart is racing, and I'm starting to like. I understand every single word, and my brain just does not want to put all that information together. Can we finish just on? It made me think about something that I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions, and some of those you've already mentioned. One of them was about silence or sound.
Yeah.
What do you prefer, or is it a diff? Do you sometimes have silence and sometimes have sound?
I usually have sound. I suppose I'm quite, some people find it hard to believe that someone, like really, educated and like professional like me could be satisfied by being an artisan. It's like, so I do like feel like I should be being formed and educated while I'm, but it might be music,
Yeah.
So I'm actually hourly, I'm learning something, even though I'm just like working with my hands.
And would you gravitate towards pencil or marker?
Interesting. Definitely pencil for drawing my sketches and for working out drawing my curves and but then I always it's so massively satisfying to go over it on marker and to make it finalize it in marker. I love
That's good.
sharp.
Yeah, I love that. Analog or digital? You can say both.
Both. Yeah, definitely both. I mean, obviously, it's making sewing is like massively analog. It's it's a non-resistant material. Like you can push and pull it in all kinds of ways. There's ease. You can get more length into a shorter length if you know how to do it, especially with certain fabrics like linen.
Monochrome or colorful?
Oh, monochrome, yeah.
Big sketches or little sketches?
Yeah, little not technical. My sketches are quite nice looking. They're not like technical, but they are technical in the sense they
they're tiny.
where there seems no, they're not tiny. They're like maybe this big.
Tiny.
Yeah.
Loose sheets or
But then big, drawing of the fire thing.
yeah.
That's which is the pattern match that Quilty shop. Yeah.
And would you work on loose sheets or in a sketchbook?
Combination of a sketchbook and scrap paper, and then my squared graph paper in a spiral bind thing that I rip them out.
Okay.
I keep them actually, but I do.
Oh, so the next one: keep mistakes or bin mistakes.
Been lots of mistakes.
Lots of
mistakes.
I see that.
Yeah.
Think then do or do then think.
Oh, think then do. Yeah.
Creative chaos or calm order.
Yeah, calm order. Yeah.
Finished or never finished.
Finished, but then there might be another version.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Yeah, definitely finish it. God. I think you know what. So the world is full of unfinished patchwork. People, usually ladies, I think, who have started a patchwork. My mother had one, and just never finished it. I think the problem is that they don't love it, and I think it's a design problem.
I love the idea that there's lots of unfinished,
if you really
attention.
If you really loved this thing, you'd finish it.
Ooh,
So is the problem is, it's not going to be that great looking when you've done. Isn't that cruel? Anyway, but lots of people finish their patchwork too. And all these patchwork shops, they try to make that really easy for you by arranging their color range on sort of tonal ranges and like, well, you can do reprints. Whereas actually, traditionally, patchwork is just like a mashup of whatever you've got. It's much better that way.
And sometimes I suppose you go through stages where you're like, oh, I hate this. And you could stop really easily. But
Totally.
You've got to keep on going. And then
Oh, with most of my new designs, there's a like, fuck, is this the ugliest thing I've ever made? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And good. I think we're on the same page. And I think also that's a really good sort of that's a good kind of point to close on for people, that you don't have to love it all the way through. And sometimes you have to stop. Sometimes you have to stop and burn it or throw it away and never to be seen again. But I think that's also a process that is kind of cathartic, and you can start again.
Well, you totally learn something. So yeah.
I do have one final question, and I suppose it's a bit about the temperament. When you're finishing something, will you stay up all night to finish something, or will you get up early to finish it?
I always get up early. It's a little bit different now. I have a studio that I have a kind of 55-minute journey to get to it. So I'm like well, prefer. But always at university, I would never do pull all nighters. I always just got up at 4 if I needed to finish the essay by 9. So I definitely am an early person.
Emily Campbell, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you to my guest, Emily Campbell, on this episode of The Empty Canvas. Please like and subscribe, and maybe send this video to somebody that you think needs a bit of a nudge on their own creative journey. I'll see you in the next episode.